How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about the Steam Deck. I hope you're having a great week playing a ton of games. I'm gonna go check out No Rest for the Wicked. I wanted to play it when it came out, looked a little rough, and then they stopped updating it for a while because 2K or Take-Two, whatever the parent company is of Private Division, was like, we're done with this indie publishing arm. Then they had to go through a whole legal battle to get the rights to their game back. They got it. There's a huge update out now called The Breach, and one thing that was specifically targeted was performance. So if it can hold a lock 30 FPS, I'll be happy. The art style looks amazing. I'm a huge fan of Moon Studios, so I want to give it a shot. Let me know what you're playing down in the comments below. But yeah, we got 3 topics to cover in this video, starting out with a brand new Steam Deck update that fixes a lot of critical bugs that were stopping your Steam Deck from working properly. So that's good. Then we got to talk about this interesting way that a guy created his own Steam Deck OLED. And finally, here's why Linux's growing popularity proves that Valve was ahead of the curve. So yeah, let's get into the first news story here, because there are some weird critical bugs flying around in SteamOS, and thankfully Valve has been on top of actually updating them pretty quickly to make sure that they don't last for too long. So the first one that I saw people commenting about last week was DLC not working in games. So like if you own DLC for a game, you would go to the actual page of the game in your Steam library, and this was affecting PC and Steam Deck, and it would say that you don't own the DLC, so when you booted up the game, you wouldn't be able to access it. And because every game has DLC now, whether it's skins, new levels, extra missions, just anything they can do to help you buy that game for the most expensive price possible, that'd be pretty annoying to deal with. I didn't really experience it, thankfully, but if you were experiencing it, which I know there were a few of you, all you got to do is go to settings, system, and then update your Steam Deck, and you should be good to go. And then the next issue would have affected you potentially if you did that, which is when you actually install a Steam Deck client update. So like the Steam client itself, not actually SteamOS, it would get stuck when you get into the restart part of it, where you get to that black screen where the progress bar was. It would load like halfway, it would stop, it would either just let your battery die or the deck would restart and keep trying. And really, you could get out of that if you just force shut off your Steam Deck and then booted it back up. It would skip that step, and then you could try to reapply it from within Steam. Still really annoying that that kept happening, because I've experienced that bug a lot on my limited edition Steam Deck OLED. I assume that it's just something breaking in a SteamOS update that never gets patched, so that's why it keeps popping up, because on my new refurbished 1TB OLED, it's never really been an issue, but now I'm kind of expecting it to happen. Thankfully, it was fixed this time around, so if you were experiencing that weird loading bar bug, that should be fixed now. And finally, they updated the BIOS of SteamOS, and apparently that was bricking people's Steam Decks. Like, they'd have to revert to the old BIOS, try to reinstall them, and that's just like time wasted that you don't want to deal with. So thankfully, that one never even went into beta. They just released it into stable. If you ran into that issue, that sucks, but it should be fixed now. The issues where you have to re-image SteamOS, in my opinion, are unacceptable, and I don't like how often they've been coming up over the past year or so. It's basically coincidentally lining up with them releasing SteamOS on other platforms. It's hard to make this thing support everything, and little bugs are going to slip through the cracks, but like if you look at other hardware like Windows PCs, PlayStations, Nintendo Switches, and Xboxes, I'm sure you could find some example of someone having to reinstall their operating system, but like it's such a rarity that you could basically say it never happens. And it doesn't happen frequently on the Steam Deck, but it happens enough to where I notice it as someone who talks about this stuff on my channel. So I'd appreciate it if they tested out these patches and software updates and everything before they actually sent them out a little bit better, so that people who aren't even in the beta channel don't have to reinstall SteamOS, because it's not that bad if you have all of your games on a micro SD card or whatever, but if you keep all your games on a bigger SSD, having to re-download everything sucks on its own. But especially with data caps that are a thing now, I mean, if you're really just trying to sit down at the end of the day and play some games, nothing sucks more than having to play tech support for a device you spent $400 on. So hopefully this doesn't happen anymore in the future now that all these issues are fixed in one big update, but we'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, that brings me to the second news story here, which is a really interesting way that a guy was able to create his own Steam Deck OLED. His issue was that he already had a Steam Deck LCD that worked perfectly fine, but he was feeling a little bit of FOMO. He was feeling left out with the Steam Deck OLED because it really is that much better. But of course, it's expensive. People aren't trying to blow $500 or whatever it costs on new hardware. So he put his thinking cap on and he created a 3D printable bracket that allows him to connect a 13-inch OLED monitor to his Steam Deck. Now, it looks kind of jank. I'm going to be real, obviously, because because it's a giant screen that's elevated above a handheld PC. And I would never personally do this. Like, I would just save up the money and buy a Steam Deck OLED. But it really does go to show that the fact that this is a handheld PC really helps you be able to do anything you want with it. Like, if you really are dead set on using stuff you already have around your house to actually improve this thing and make it better, you could do that. You could print this file, you could put a 13-inch monitor on your Steam Deck, and technically you have a Steam Deck OLED with a much higher resolution screen. Now, of course, he's going to run into other issues like the fact that the big screen has a higher resolution than the 800p OLED screen, which is going to drain the battery a lot faster. And I'd also imagine that performance is not going to be great. But I see Reddit posts and articles about people playing games on the TV all the time with the Steam Deck, and I don't know how they're playing some of these games because like the performance wouldn't be up to snuff for me. But you know, everyone's got different standards for what they find acceptable, and that's the best part about PC gaming. I mean, the most popular hardware out there through the Valve hardware surveys is a 4060 build, which like I would never consider buying a 4060 because I want 1440p gaming. But I watched a video where someone was talking about how new graphics cards are having hardware issues. They're exorbitantly expensive. If you already have a 4060, there are a lot of games you can play at ultra settings above 1080p. You just got to be a little bit more selective. So it's like, you got to do what works for you. This obviously works for this guy. I get why he wanted to do it because I love a project, but I maybe would have gone with the Deck HD, which is that 1200p screen you can buy for the Steam Deck LCD. Of course, it's not an actual OLED screen, but I think it's similar technology to what you get with the Switch 2. And I'm pretty sure it also brings it up to 120 hertz. So you do get benefits there. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult than just replacing the battery or an SSD to actually replace the screen. You got to heat up the glass. You got to redo some adhesive. You got to basically take the entire thing apart because you can't just remove the top shell in the same way you can remove the bottom shell. So it is a little bit more of an involved process than just doing this. But yeah, I mean, all roads point to just save up your money and buy a Steam Deck OLED. I just thought this was interesting and cool, so I figured I'd highlight it here on the channel. And that brings me to the third news story here. There was a really interesting video I saw go up on PewDiePie's channel over the weekend where in a previous video, he showed off his desktop and people were impressed that he was using Linux. So he went through why he switched to Linux from Windows, and he made some really good points. I recommend checking out the video because it's not like a high-level advanced user's take on Linux. It's like someone who's like me, who's used Windows for a very long time and was always like, I don't know, scared to install Linux because the only experience I ever had with it was like watching Mr. Robot or something, or like looking at government computers and movies, and it just looks so foreign. But then when I got SteamOS, I dug into it and I was like, oh, this really isn't that bad. It's very similar to Windows, especially with the Plasma desktop that the Steam Deck uses, and I really enjoy plugging in my Steam Deck to a dock and using Linux that way. It works great as a desktop, honestly, just as well as it works as a regular old handheld with a game mode and everything like that. So it's really not that bad to actually just install it and get it up and running. Now, he gets a little crazy with how much he's customized it, and he runs into a lot of errors when he's using the terminal to download apps because of things he's deleted and everything like that. But one thing that really stood out to me was how he was able to see that it was taking 45 seconds for his PC to boot up, and then he was able to dig into why that is and remove whatever feature was making that happen. And then he noticed that it took like 14 seconds or something for Firefox to boot up. So he removed some files, turned some things off, and bam, it boots up in like 2 seconds. So it's like crazy how customizable Linux is. I'm always scared to do it on my Steam Deck because in the past, like especially right after it came out and I was just installing things left and right, like the Heroic Game Launcher, Battle.net, using Lutris, using all these different pieces of software to really get in the nitty gritty aspects of the Steam Deck, I had to reinstall SteamOS like pretty much once a week, and then I'd have to re-download all my games that weren't on my SD card, and it sucked. But as time has gone on and I've gotten more comfortable with it, it's like second nature for me. And honestly, I think the benefits are really strong to the point where if I didn't play a lot of online games that used anti-cheat, I would just switch wholesale to Linux because of all the headaches Windows provides. And it really just shows that Valve was onto something way back with the original Steam machines. I understand that the whole reason they got into Linux in the first place was because of, I guess, fear. That's not necessarily the right word, but it's like it works here. They were scared that Windows would get a little too power hungry and shut out Valve. And the farther we get into this future where Xbox is a separate thing from Windows is really going away, and they're just going to make their next console a Windows PC with a game mode just like SteamOS, you know, they're going to want people using Game Pass. They're going to want people using the Xbox store to play games because that's where they get their money. They could start making it more difficult for Steam to be the default app that everyone downloads to buy and play their games on PC. So it was more of a defense for Valve to kind of divorce themselves, I guess, from Windows and move to Linux and create Proton so that you can run games that are just Windows installs on Linux. And all of that hard work really paid off. I mean, it didn't really work so well with SteamOS 2.0. I remember trying to install it on my main PC and having to buy a new hard drive, but I'm really glad they stuck with it and figured out how to make Proton work so that they could come back swinging with SteamOS 3.0, because now it really does feel like a legitimate competitor, not only to consoles like the Switch, the PS5, the Xbox, but it also feels like a viable solution to all of Windows problems, because in that time that Valve was basically stripping down the Windows style operating system to make it something you could use on any hardware, Windows has been making their operating system a lot harder to interact with, and they've been adding in spyware, they've been adding in the forced Windows accounts. I mean, it's just crazy how bloated and hard to use Windows has gotten while Linux has only gotten easier. So every time I talk about how I haven't installed Bazite on my main Windows PC, which is a Razer Blade 4090 laptop, I say it's because NVIDIA doesn't play nice with Bazite, and people are saying that NVIDIA works just fine. So I looked into it, and you can get the driver support for NVIDIA, which is great. So a lot of the games that I already play will work fine on Bazite. The problem is you can't really use game mode. There's something with the Vulkan API and how it works with Linux or Bazite or whatever you want to call it, and the NVIDIA graphics card that just makes it a stuttery mess. So it would be like 90% there for me. It just wouldn't be the desktop version of SteamOS that I really want it to be. So I looked into building an AMD PC, and it is cost competitive to something like an NVIDIA PC for sure, but like it's still $2,000. And because my laptop has a 4090 in it, and I understand that that's nowhere close to a desktop 4090, but playing games at 1440p high and ultra settings at a lock 60 is totally achievable with this thing. The fans barely spin up. It's just not like $2,000 I really want to spend right now just to have a desktop that sits under my TV. But when I saw PewDiePie's video and how he had his whole desktop set up and how he like customized it and made it look all cool, he basically inspired it or themed it like a nuclear reactor. It really got me thinking. So like, I think my extra SSD bay in my laptop is going to go for a 4TB SSD, and then I'm going to partition it and install Bazite and then play games that traditionally stutter on Windows. Like I'm pretty sure Unreal Engine 5 games like that new one, Expedition 33, I want to try out, or RoboCop Rogue City. I'm pretty sure they don't stutter as much on Linux. Like they still stutter a little bit, but it's dramatically reduced on Linux versus Windows. So that'd be fun to try. I know for a fact Elden Ring through Proton does not stutter at all, whereas on Windows it stutters like crazy when you're moving across the map. So there are plenty of other games that I could take advantage of. I really think I'm going to take the dive. And I think it's really cool that if you go to Bazite's website, they have a whole guide set up there for not only if you want to install it on a fresh, clean hard drive on a Windows laptop, but like also if you want to partition your drive. They obviously recommend that you make it the only operating system on your device, because when you have Windows installed on an SSD, it like puts these BitLocker things in place that you have to disable, which opens you up to security risks or whatever, which like it makes a lot of sense, but it's still not realistic to me to completely switch to Linux because I play enough online games that have easy anti-cheat. Like if Valve can figure out how to get past this easy anti-cheat issue where people can just indiscriminately block games from being accessed on Linux, even years after they came out, like with Battlefield 1 and Apex Legends, I mean, that's really the final boss for SteamOS, because no matter what, no matter how great, amazing, light, fast, awesome they make SteamOS 3.0, that one point of criticism that you cannot play online games that everyone plays, like Destiny 2, like Call of Duty, like X, Y, and Z, it's just going to be that infinitely high hurdle that they need to figure out. I don't know what the solution is, like if they find a way to circumvent it, if they figure out a way to introduce security measures, which would kind of be antithetical to why people are on Linux in the first place. Like, I don't know what they can really do outside of going and talking to these developers and just showing them that this has a viable future and has a viable player base that are willing to spend money on their games, which should be reason enough to support Linux. There's really nothing else they can do. So yeah, since I have you guys, primarily PC gamers, let me know if you have Linux installed on your laptop, your desktop, or mainly if you have it installed on an NVIDIA PC. I have my DMs open on the Deck Ready Twitter, which is at deck_ready. I'd love to talk about this stuff. So if you have any tips or advice or just general thoughts on using Linux in addition to Windows on an NVIDIA PC or an AMD PC, please feel free to reach out in the comments or there on my DMs, because I'd love to hear from you guys about this stuff because it's interesting to me. But yeah, I don't think I need to link to PewDiePie's channel. It's easy to find. I think the video is really interesting and worth checking out. If you've been looking for a reason to take the plunge into installing Linux on your main PC, I mean, I feel like this would convince you because it convinced me. Like, I was right there on the edge and it's kind of pushing me over. I don't know. Maybe I'll check out Facebook Marketplace later and see if I can get a cheap AMD PC that I can try all this out on, because that dream of being able to replace all of my consoles with an AMD PC that runs Bazzite or SteamOS when that comes out, just sitting under my TV with my DualSense Edge, which includes all the same features as PS5 versions of the games with the PC versions. I mean, that's just awesome, man. I have so many Steam games, and it just like, you get so much better performance out of PC, and just like, I'm so familiar with how everything works, and I love the Steam interface. Like, that is my final boss. That's what I really want, a Steam interface on a TV. It's really a big dream of mine. So yeah, maybe I'll check out Facebook Marketplace. Is it worth it? Let me know down in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.